Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. First graphic tonight is the warning watch advisory, or tonight's hazardous weather, except for the watch here. That's flood watch still out for northeast Prince William Sound, southeast Prince William Sound. Rain expected to come through heavy at times later tonight and through tomorrow and tomorrow night. So there's still a possibility of some flooding occurring in that area. And then for this evening until midnight tonight, there's a wind advisory again for the eastern Alaska range here. West of the Tote Cutoff, through the passes west of the Tote Cutoff for 25, 35 mile per hour winds with gusts to 55 miles per hour through the passes until midnight tonight. So moving on to satellite imagery, you can see a low pressure area stands out quite vividly here with the frontal structure coming up toward Kodiak at about 2 p.m. this afternoon. Storm force winds here across the Gulf of Alaska, Barren Islands, through Shelikof Strait and into Kachemak Bay. Very windy conditions also back out over Bristol Bay, turning northerly there right across the Fox Islands and western Alaska Peninsula. And heaviest rainfall amounts over the last, today and yesterday along the Alaska Peninsula back up to Kodiak Island. And rain has yet to start, at least by 4 p.m. here for, it did start at Seward, raining in Seward, Seldovia, and Homer, but not yet over at Cordova or into Prince William Sound. Already high clouds spreading into the northern southeast coast, and a lot of high thick cirrus spreading into the Tanana Valley and also back to the west. Lower clouds here through the Bering Strait from the Chukchi Sea on down around St. Lawrence Island. You can see some pretty good clearing up here over the northern portions of the upper Yukon Valley on up to Arctic Village. And a good chunk of the North Slope, seeing some sunshine this afternoon. Out to the Arctic coast, saw clear skies at Barrow in one of the observations. And also some clearing with high pressure here just west of the Pribilofs on down to Adak and Atka, although he picked up some clouds. And then the next cloud shield with the cloud shield with the next storm that'll be bringing gale force winds into the Aleutians tomorrow. And rolling this on the advancing this to the chart today, 970 millibar low, still a fair ways south of the Alaska Peninsula, but again that front lifting northward here, and pretty good shot of rain coming into Kodiak. They picked about an inch in the last day or so there, about an inch today, or in the last 24 hours ending at 4 p.m. this afternoon. Even heavier amounts back down along the Alaska Peninsula there, with Chignik picking up 1.84 inches, and Sand Point had about an inch and a half of rain with this system, with those with the front right in the area there, and you can see rain shield just lifting northward into the southern portion of the Kenai Peninsula, and then of course back across into Kachemak Bay, and then some rain along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. Areas of moisture out here over the southwest interior, but comparatively light. Otherwise, just a few isolated showers up in the northwest, and just a lot of cloudiness spreading northward and eastward here. Still some sunshine down over the southern southeast coast, but you can see the rain pushing in quite close to the coastline here by late this afternoon. And for tonight, that's going to roll right on up in across the northern panhandle. with rain probably falling from about Port Alexander on up, making its way into Juneau, on up to the passes. Rain becoming moderate for Yakutat, and as the whole moisture field and front pushes eastward, rain heavy at times. Southern Kenai Peninsula all the way over to Cordova, and then advancing in toward Yakutat. It's going to stay breezy. Winds should come down under storm force later tonight here for Kodiak Island, with that front lifting northward and weakening a little bit, but still wet conditions. Rain continues at times, but becoming a little more intermittent and lighter than what you saw the last 24 hours there for that area. And northerly winds continuing for the Fox Islands. Dutch Harbor had a gust, around Alaska, had a gust to 70 miles an hour out in the north this afternoon, so very windy conditions. That will continue into this evening, and gusty winds 40 to 50 miles an hour occurring over the Alaska Peninsula. That'll continue into this evening and tonight as well. Less wind up here and much drier conditions. Offshore flow resulting in some breaks there. Nunivak Island up across the Yukon Delta. Otherwise, it's mostly mid and high level clouds up over the central interior. That'll continue spreading up toward the Brooks Range, but from the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast, staying pretty nice here tonight. Mostly variably cloudy skies with probably some VFR conditions persisting there along much of the coastline. This next front out here just to the west of Cape Lisburne and Point Hope, really not going to advance eastward too much there. High pressure from the Seward Peninsula southward all the way to the central Aleutians. That's going to keep that thing back to the north and west. However, this front is beginning to advance eastward, and that'll spread some rain and increase the winds, at least up to small craft advisory levels for the far western Aleutians after midnight tonight. And then for tomorrow, we've got gale force winds out there over the western Aleutians with rain advancing to Amchitka, and not bad there. High pressure ridge right over the eastern Aleutians, Adak and Atka. Could see some sunshine tomorrow. Pretty light variable winds there. Less wind, but not ending completely here. Still pretty northerly, but not as strong definitely as what you saw today there for the Unalaska and Nikolsky area. Showers now for the Alaska Peninsula with less wind there as well. In fact, the entire North Gulf Coast here tomorrow, all the way back into Kachemak Bay. Kodiak will see a lot less wind, losing the storms, losing the gales, but holding on to the small craft advisories for Kodiak on into Bristol Bay and back along the Alaska Peninsula, probably over toward the eastern Aleutians as well. But you can see a lot less of a gradient here along the southwest coast or over the interior for that matter. So winds are going to be pretty light. And the heavy rain now shifting eastward with the front. Still rain continuing throughout the day here for the North Gulf Coast, becoming a little more showery back toward the Kenai Peninsula. Kind of an occasional rain with that southeast flow there for Kodiak Island, cloudy skies. But this front pushing northward and really weakening, especially as it crosses the Alaska range there. But it could probably pull a few showers north of the mountains and maybe re-enhance them over the White Mountains and then back up over the north central interior areas. But the heaviest rainfall again will be back down along the coast, and stays pretty wet here for the northern panhandle. Southern areas still under the influence of higher pressure, so dry conditions, variably cloudy, and maybe a little bit of sunshine, but I wouldn't look for too much. And then looks like probably going to go to IFR conditions moving in probably by tomorrow morning for the Chilkoot and White Pass areas. And moving on to Tuesday, it looks like clears out again here over the panhandle. Another front develops right through here. The first one just washes out. And so look for more sunshine, dry conditions there for the southeast coast with light winds, although small craft advisories out of the southeast stay in effect along the coast there. This low center actually develops along the frontal boundary and then pulls northward and then northwest, so that's going to kick the winds up again along the eastern North Gulf Coast. Small craft advisories out now again with that, depending on how that develops, how strong it gets, and exactly the track it takes. But right now it looks like it'll track back up across the Kenai Peninsula, so that's going to bring another shot of rain. Not quite as heavy, but probably some moderate rain will come in right into Prince William Sound, focusing more on the western Prince William Sound area and the southern side of the Kenai Peninsula, but a chance of rain all the way up across central western Copper River Basin, possibly jumping the Alaska Range there into the 40-mile country with some light rain, scattered showers or sprinkles, and then rain advancing westward here into possibly the Chugach Mountains, maybe Anchorage, kind of right on the edge there, Kenai, Anchorage on up to roughly Palmer. Susitna Valley looking dry. Very nice here over the central and northern interior again, all the way out to the north slope. Could see some patchy fog on the eastern Arctic coast. Maybe a little bit of a pickup in the winds possibly there, but nothing too strong. And then the jet stream here carrying moisture northward in the Russian Far East and then taking a turn to the northeast there. So could see a little bit of moisture grazing the western Arctic coast and then taking off to the north there. Storm out here to the west, 976 millibar low, so gales still in effect out here over the western Aleutians, and pick the winds up into the Adak-Atka area, but very light winds for the Fox Highlands, and no gradient here for the Alaska Peninsula or Bristol Bay. Very light winds, eastern Bering Sea once again, into much of the interior areas. And for temperatures this afternoon, mostly in the 50s here over the Panhandle, but more sunshine, warmer air aloft, and mid to upper 60s there over the southern areas with 64 at Klawock, 66 at Stewart. Otherwise 55 up there at Skagway, 57 Elfin Cove, and for Yakutat up to 61, Cordova 58, lower to mid 50s here south central Alaska and the Kenai Peninsula, 52 with all the rain and wind there for Kodiak, 50 degrees even at Galkana, lower to mid 50s to Susitna Valley, Fairbanks breaking 60 this afternoon, as did Tanana and Fort Yukon. And otherwise up to the north here, fall into the 40s for the Brooks Range, and anywhere from 45 to 50 out along the Arctic coast, upper 40s to mid 50s over the northwest, 50s covering all of these southwest interior areas. And for the Pribilos, right around 50 this afternoon, 50s Alaska Peninsula and the central Aleutians. And for the lows tonight, 30s here, Brooks Range northward out to the Arctic coast, mid 40s here over the southwest to near 50 or into the lower 50s there for the Alaska Peninsula, falling back into the upper 40s out west, and mild mid 50s here over the southern southeast coast. And for the highs tomorrow, back into mid 60s possibly here down in the southern areas, maybe even a few degrees warmer than that. Lower 60s up over the Tanana Valley, upper Yukon, back down toward Nikolai and McGrath, then back into the 50s. And North Slope rising into the lower 50s with the Arctic coast in the mid 40s, lower to mid 50s there for the Aleutians. And for flying weather, starting the day out, not too bad here over the interior, looking for increasing IFR here along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range and definitely western Prince William Sound, southern Kenai Peninsula with all that moisture coming northward, but everything's shifting eastward, so this big chunk will begin to edge in toward the southeast coast. And then we'll see by tomorrow afternoon, the northern areas there become IFR with marginal VFR still back just off the coast there, IFR in closer, wrapping up along the coast and westward into western Prince William Sound, IFR, western Alaska Range, VFR here out over the Bering Sea areas, and then picking up some IFR farther out to the west. And for Anaktuvik and Adigan, both VFR tomorrow. Lake Clark Merrill, IFR, rainy, marginal becoming IFR, windy, marginal VFR developing on the southern entrance. Isabel marginal, Mentasta VFR becoming marginal, and Tanita, same trend, becoming marginal in the afternoon. IFR in the eastern approach for Portage, and Chilkoot and White IFR. And for the freezing levels, quite a gradient here from 8,000 feet over the Wrangell Mountains to 14,000 feet down there by Dixon Entrance. Otherwise through the interior, roughly at about 6,000 to 8,000 feet, and then another big warm up here way out to the west. Icing, areas of occasional widespread moderate, pretty likely here. They'll be shifting eastward throughout the day tomorrow. Exiting Cape Yakataga, focusing in on Yakutat and the northern panhandle with areas of light icing southwestward across south central Alaska into Bristol Bay. And the upper level wind flow chart, jet stream south to north, 140 knots, bringing that moisture northward. But again, everything will slowly be shifting eastward as well. And 9,000 foot winds for tomorrow, still pretty breezy, but not nearly as strong as they were today. Southeast 25 to 30 into Kodiak Island, northerlies 35 across the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay, lighter up over the interior, 30 to 40 knot winds coming into the western Aleutians. 3,000 feet, getting pretty breezy here along the coast, southeast coast, and to the north up to 35 knots. 25 knotters North Gulf Coast, pick it up to 30 knots. Kodiak, northerlies up to 40 Alaska Peninsula, and still across Unalaska Island, lighter up to the north, and another increase in the winds out there to the west. And for turbulence, occasional light to isolated moderate chop, Kodiak, Aleutian Range, Bristol Bay, right on down to the peninsula to Nikolsky, and then also here possibly over the Lynn Canal Glacier Bay areas, and light to isolated moderate chop across Copper River Basin. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining us once again is Eric Stevens, our good friend from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at UAF. And thanks for joining us, Eric. Really appreciate it.
Oh, happy to be here, Dave.
We love to hear about all the fascinating developments, new and old, and how we're using the tools here, especially around Alaska. And I've got to think that, satellite meteorology right now is a fascinating time to be involved in. If we go back to the first satellite, Tyros, back in 1960, I think is when we got some of those first pictures. Weather and meteorology probably changed that day for a whole lot of people, and it's still changing today, right?
Oh, you know it. Satellite imagery is so important, and it's getting better all the time. Yeah. Of course, never perfect, but especially for us in Alaska, where there are other data sets like radars and weather balloons are so thinly spread. Right. The satellite is the great equalizer because the satellite sees everything.
Right.
Yeah. Right. We've got one particular issue in volcanic ash detection.
That's a big deal here. Yeah.
You know it. If you fly an airplane into volcanic ash, your jet engine might just fail. And an airplane without engines is in a world of hurt. Sure. So if there's a volcano that goes off, satellite imagery is the way to track that plume of ash and to tell pilots this is where you need to not be to avoid this ash plume. And there's a phrase out there, what's the difference? What's the difference?
Okay.
Well, it turns out, what we're going to discuss today, that the difference is everything. There's a technique called channel differencing.
Okay.
That if you take one piece of the spectrum of what the satellite detects and a slightly different wavelength of that spectrum, even though those two images might look similar, magical things happen when you subtract one from the other. And they reveal information that was already there, but it was hard to find until you did that subtraction.
That sounds like Nicolas Cage in National Treasure when he's got those fancy glasses and he's flipping one up and back and forth. I mean, is this what we're talking about?
Well, let's go more highbrow and talk Michelangelo.
Oh,
so apparently Michelangelo made some amazing sculpture and someone said, Michael, that's amazing. How did you do it? And Michelangelo's reply allegedly was, well, in that rock, the statue was already in there.
Right.
I just scraped away the unnecessary bits. In satellite meteorology, sometimes there are meteorological features that are in the data, but you can't see it until you combine or difference some of the channels.
Okay.
And we've got a case, good old Pavlov volcano goes off now and then.
Sure.
And you can observe directly a picture of the volcano. Just take it with your iPhone. You can see a volcano going off.
Yep.
Right. But if you want to get the broad view, we need satellite to do that. Now, there are a couple of wavelengths that we can look at. So what's a wavelength? That's the amount of space between a peak and a valley and another peak in a certain part of the electromagnetic spectrum. We're going to look at 12 micron wavelength and 10.8 micron wavelength.
What is a micron?
So what's a micron? Yeah, we're getting into the geek department now. A micron is a unit of length, and it is quite tiny. We're looking at what's called long wave wavelengths.
Okay.
But it takes 25,000 of these microns to make an inch. A human blood cell is about 5 microns across. So when we're talking about 12 micron imagery as allegedly long wave, well, that's relative.
Pretty short for light.
Yeah, it's other part of the, it's just an expression for the spectrum there.
Okay.
So we can look at a 12 micron image, say a satellite image. At 12 microns, we're seeing a heat signature here, really, and the way this color enhancement works is the yellow and the red stuff is high cold clouds down here over the Gulf of Alaska into South Central. And if you were asked, where do you find the volcanic ash plume in this image?
Hey, where do you find the volcanic plume in this image?
It's hard to do. I'm not sure I could find it. If you were to look at this image and just say, show me what jumps out at you here, I'd say, well, nothing really. Well, let's look. So 12 micron doesn't help us. Let's look at 10.8 microns.
All right.
All right, look at that. It's practically the same image. So where's this volcanic ash? Can't find it at 12 microns, can't really see it at 10.8, but when we subtract one channel from the other, magically the plume appears. The color enhancement here highlights the ash in blue.
Wow.
The information was already there, but we couldn't find it until we subtracted one channel from another.
Very interesting.
It's almost magical. Similarly, let's say you're looking for fog up on the North Slope. It's kind of a foggy neighborhood.
Sure.
In 11 micron and 3.9 micron, we've got a 3.9 micron image here. It's a big fuzzy blur over Barrow. We can't see where the fog is. But the information is lurking in there waiting for us to reveal it. All we have to do is find that difference between the 11 micron and the 3.9, and then this image becomes this image, and the fog bank jumps right out, and you can see it up there at Barrow. Now, you got to choose the right tool for the job. Like they say, you open your toolbox, all kinds of stuff in there. What do we need for this particular task? If you want to find volcanic ash, we look at 12 and 10.8 micron, find that difference. If you want to find fog, we'll look at 11 and 3.9 micron, find that difference. It's great, different tools for different jobs. Of course, there's always caveats and gotchas, but this fog procedure, it only works at night, because when the sun comes up, it gets in the way. So every product has its strengths and limitations, and in meteorology, the challenge is using the right tool for the right job, and these are some of those tools.
And discovery is still happening, even with meteorology. The weather's been around for a long time, but the tools that are being developed to understand the meteorology is fascinating and still very new science.
It's such a young science. We've come so far. I'm getting old enough now that I can literally say that, when I was a boy, we didn't have this kind of thing. And there's new things happening all the time. New satellites will be launched in coming years that will have better instruments than ever before. It's an exciting time, and this is so helpful for Alaska because satellites help fill in the gaps between other ways of observing the weather. Satellites, the great equalizer for Alaska.
Yeah, and help so many people stay safe in so many ways every day up here in the last frontier.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, protecting lives and property.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again, Eric. We love to hear about this fascinating information, and boy, it just makes me want to go watch satellite pictures all day. So hopefully we're inspiring more people to do the same thing and just be curious. It's a wonderful thing. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Southeast winds 25 knots here on the south coast, 30 knots on the north coast, 12 to 13 foot seas with gusts of 45 knots. And then for Tuesday, 25 knot winds here from the north coast, falling back to 20 knots down along the coast there, Prince of Wales Island, south to southeast 15 over the inside waters with 3 feet. And for Prince William Sound tomorrow, east 30 knots, north 20, northern Cook Inlet, northeast 30 knots, southern Cook Inlet into Kachemak Bay, southeast 25 for the Barrens. So storm warnings continue for the North Gulf Coast into the Barrens Kachemak Bay tonight, and then dropping off considerably tomorrow. And then for Tuesday, 10 to 15 knot northerlies for Cook Inlet, northeast 15 Kachemak Bay. And then with that system pulling back to the northwest, small craft advisory is back in the picture for the eastern North Gulf Coast. And for Bristol Bay, northeast 30, all across, right on down across the peninsula, turning more northerly in the Pacific side, and easterly there from Castle Cape to Sitkinak. And then much lighter the next day, east-northeast 15 knots, seas 3 to 5 feet, Bering Sea side, 9 to 8 feet in the Pacific side. And for the Aleutians, still pretty breezy, 30 to 35 knots, so still have some gales in there tomorrow for the mainly Unalaska island. More lighter and variable here over the central Aleutians under high pressure than the next system bringing gales into the western Aleutians. And then that advances eastward on Tuesday, 35 to 40 knots, small craft advisories back into Adak and Atka, and now the light winds over the Fox Islands. And for the southwest coast, northeast 25, south of Nunivak Island, north 25 for the Pribilofs. So that's where the small craft advisories will be. Lighter winds 15 to 20 out of the north there for the northern Bering to St. Lawrence Island. And then even lighter winds on Tuesday, kind of pretty variable up here over the Bering Sea. But east 25 there in response to that next system, that'll actually be more over in this part of the zone. Otherwise southeast 10 for the Pribilofs. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, east 20, 4-foot seas falling back to 15 central coast and even lighter on the west side. South 15 from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort. And then for Tuesday, southerlies 15 knots here from Wales up to Cape Beaufort. Southeast 15 on the west side. And then east northeast 10 to 15 knots for the central and part of the east coast there. But you can see as you get farther to the east, they swing around to the west, but only at about 10 knots, but they're still holding the seas at 6 feet. And for tonight, again, heavy rains moving up to the North Gulf Coast, Kenai Peninsula, into Prince William Sound, advancing eastward, and we've got rain moving in across the northern panhandle late tonight into tomorrow. Otherwise, still pretty windy storm warnings this evening for the North Gulf Coast back to Kodiak, and windy conditions again persisting here for the Fox Islands. And then for Monday, less wind and rain here for the North Gulf Coast and the Alaska Peninsula, but the heaviest rain now shifting out in advance of this front, a narrow band over to about Yakutat, keeping it wet over the northern panhandle. That dries out the next day to partly sunny skies, and this system comes northwestward to about this location late in the afternoon. So small craft advisories, another round of moderate rain into Prince William Sound, and then another.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.